Awesome. So in the previous test harness webinar, we went through the concept of app quality and how testing relates to app quality. And the main reason why we write tests for our apps is to make sure that our deployments function exactly the way we envision them to function. So app quality is one of the foremost goals that we must have primarily as the development teams in our various organizations. And the testing, the CHT test harness is built specifically to test CHT applications. And then we jumped into how to work with the CHT test harness, how to prepare it, and then writing test scenarios with examples using the default config. I'll hand over to my colleague, Paul, to walk us through writing tests for contact summary as a continuation of the previous the webinar. And yeah, feel free to interrupt at any point if you have questions.
Thanks, Elijah. And let me share my screen. In this section, we'll be talking about how to test contact summary, knowing that contact summary are places where basic information are shown, like the contact information, such as name and the phone number and all of the details that we want to show on the profile page of the contact. So all of these information are set in the contact summary templated GS file, which can be found directly at the root of the project. So in this file, we define the fields, the cards, and even the context. So these details will be used or will be displayed on the profile, on the contact profile page. So during this test, we'll be focusing on two main parts. These are the fields and the cards. Okay, so for this test, we'll be testing how we can display the patient details, like how to be sure that what we wanted to be displayed on the profile page of the contact are well displayed, and these are the data we want to be there. For this example, we'll be using this kind of contact summary where we have the medic ID, the age, the sex, the phone number, and lineage. So in total, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, fields displayed in the field section of the contact summary. We've talked about the card, and this will be the one we'll be testing the active pregnancy card to see what are the details we wanted to display and if they are well displayed. So let's come back to the field section. In the field section, we wanted to display, like I said, the patient ID, the contact age, and the sex, and the phone and the lineage as well. So we have 5 fields here to display. So quickly, to test the contact summary component, we have this function that we can get directly from harness, where we call harness and the get context summary, who will actually get all these objects that we have defined here, like the context, the cards, and the fields that we have defined and that are supposed to be shown on the profile contact page. So once we get this object, we now, test, we can put the different tests we want on the different fields that we are targeting. Okay, so for this example, I will be seeking whether the age, the sex, and the phone are well displayed. So for test purpose, I will be fixing the subject phone, the patient phone, to this number, and also the date of birth. Recently, we've talked about this data that can be defined directly in the harness default in this object, the patient object. All this data can be overridden directly in the test as well. So let me test this and see how it is behaving. Sure. Let me clear this console. Sure. So let me run it again so we can see if all is good. So we can see here that the test is passing, but let's put some breakpoint to see what exactly is being tested and what are the value and how is the structure of the field. So let's test it again. So we can see here we have the contact summary and we have the cards, we have the context, we have the fields. And directly we are focusing on the fields here. We have 1, 2, 3, 5. We have 5 fields, which are the patient ID, age, sex field, and parent. And now we are testing the age to be exactly equal to what we have set here. And as well, the phone number and the sex of the patient as well, which was defined here in the harness default JSON file, which is female. So this is basically how you can test the contact summary when you want to focus on the patient data. Now let's quickly move to a case where we have some a card, and in this particular example, we'll be focusing on the pregnancy condition card. And this card will be displayed whenever a pregnancy registration form is submitted. And it should display information about the pregnancy, the active pregnancy, the number of weeks, the high risk, and some other details that we wanted to display. We can see it here where we defined it, the pregnancy active card with the different fields that have been added here. High risk, danger signs, and all of the other stuff that is displayed here. Okay, so we have 6 fields here in this card that needed to be displayed, and it should be well calculated and should display the adequate data. So let's come back. So in this test, we will be filling a pregnancy registration form with danger scenario. Okay, so we have this risk of danger. Sorry. So here you are. So we wanted to fill this pregnancy registration form by putting some data that should reflect danger risk, so that we have a card that is shown with this kind of, that reflect exactly the output, the input in the form. So to get it done, we have in the past webinar show how to fill the form, and we be passing the dangerous input to these very form. Then we'll be checking if the form has submitted well. If there is no issue, we get the content summary, and then we'll be checking one by one the different fields that we have added, such as the weeks, the pregnant weeks, and different dates, and as well if there is high risk, and the different fields that we have added in the contact summary. So the flow is exactly the same. We'll be getting the contact summary object and checking the fields in the card. So now as we are verifying the card, actually, we'll be getting the card like we tested just now. We can see the fields and the card. So now we'll be focusing the cards and getting different fields that we've added in this card. So let's give this also a try. So we have placed a breakpoint here to see what the field is. So we are here. We have contact. Let me just move it. Okay, sorry. Let me go here. Sure. Good. So let's test it again. I'm testing. Okay, it's been tested. Let me stop. Okay, I have some tests running. Okay, sure. Now it is running. So we have the active pregnancy card that we have, picked from the contact summary cards, and these objects have some, some fields that are defined in the contact summary. So these are these fields: the weeks pregnant here, the expected delivery date, the high risk, the current danger signs, last visited, completed ANC visits. So we have all these fields that are here. Okay, we have these 6 fields, and we are now checking the values of the different fields according to the input that we have set here, such as the method NMP, the date, and the different factors that we have added. See, so by checking all these fields one by one, we are assuring that the contact summary is behaving exactly like how it should, and that it displaying the different data in the format that we want, and as well in the by taking the exact width that it should. So all these details should be exactly conform to what we have set in the contact summary template GS5. So this is how you test. We used to test the contact summary using CHT test harness. And I will pause here. And if you have any question, or if you used to test it in another way, please share. Thank you.
The testing hierarchy with harness. So to present on this, I welcome Franklin Kembo.
Yeah, so I'll take us through testing hierarchies. So basically, it's like when your CHT app has different users residing in different hierarchies, how do you configure the data, especially at the harness default.json level, to ensure that you provide the right data to the right user whom you are currently testing? So I'll give us a brief background. So at Brink, we were developing a disease surveillance app for cholera. So basically the app was, we wanted a CHP to be able to do house visits and screen for any symptoms that are likely to be cholera. And then they were to escalate the scenario and flag it to the CHA. So the CHP, community health promoter, CHA, community health assistant. So now once they escalate that scenario, the CHA was supposed to verify the case and ask them whether is it true that this case you have escalated is actually a confirmed case, so that they just actually have to go that extra step of confirming, yeah, that, yeah, this was not by mistake. This is actually a cholera case. And then from there, when that case was confirmed, then the disease surveillance officer will now be notified of that scenario. And now they're supposed to be prepared to conduct lab tests for this patient who has now been referred to their facility. So all in all, there were 3 levels that had different tasks. So we had the CHP, the CHA, and the disease surveillance officer, sorry. Yeah. And yeah, so now our challenge was to have when we are testing the tasks at different levels. So we have CHP, CHA, and then the DSO now. Our challenge was like, how do we make the data to be different for both of them, you know, as per their level, that is in the harness default. So, well, at that time, my approach was, because the structure of the harness default, which we're going to look into briefly, I had multiple harness files, and then I exploited the weakness of that harness data path, and now kept on changing it for each level in my tests. Yeah. However, I realized that that is quite repetitive, because now I could only change one level and leave the rest as it is before. And also additionally, I realized from the documentation, the harness data path is supposed to serve more for should you have the file residing elsewhere, then you can point harness while instantiating it to that different path. So it's not supposed to be used for different files, but rather just if at all you have a different path. Yeah. And so therefore, the final effective solution that I learned from previous webinar and also tried on my own was to have all the different users in one defaults.harness JSON file, and then from there instantiate the harness with a particular user for the different levels that we are testing for. So now I'll share my screen now. As you can see, I have the harness.defaults.json, and here I just had the CHP only. And of course, now the patient, that is the household head, and then the CHP contact ID only. And now because I didn't know how to probably switch users, I decided to have other defaults.json files. And so, for example, for the CHA, I also had the same. And as you can see, the household health still remains the same, but I just changed this one here. I changed that one. And then same case for the DSO, the disease surveillance officer. I had this not changing and just this one changing. And of course, as you can see, now I was just changing users. That was the only thing that was changing. DSO here, CHA, I was also changing here. And then this one, I was changing here, as you can see. Now, the focus will be on the task, testing the tasks, because that's where the issue was. So the first task that was to be tested was a CHP submitted a case that is likely to be cholera, and the CHA is supposed to ask them to confirm whether that indeed is the case. So now, as you can see here now, in this test, you can see what I did initially was when instantiating harness, now I exploited harness data path and then pointed it to use cha.defaults.json, and thereby, you know, the tests ran, and I'll show you that they all ran, but you realize that is still redundant anyway. And same to the DSO now when they're supposed to be collecting specimen for a case that has now been flagged to them by the CHA. You now realize I was also doing the same thing, exploiting this to have that. Yeah, and now if you'll just allow me, I can run the tests for the tasks, and you'll see they still run, but it's not correct or rather efficient. So let me just look at my package.json to see, yeah, test tasks. So that's what I'll do. I just run test and then tasks, because that's our focus here for the different levels. Oops, this happens sometimes. Just rerun that. Wait, browser disconnected. Okay, let's see. Yeah, okay. Now it's working. Yeah, funnily enough, I've never known why sometimes browser disconnects while running, but I usually try to blame Puppeteer because it's what he's trying to mock the, the browser actions and stuff here. So my method is really just to shut down the tests and then rerun them. So what I wanted to prove here is this method still works. As you can see, all tests are passing, but that is not really the correct way. So the best way is for us to have all our data in one defaults.json file. And then from there, when instantiating the harness, now we now change the user and not the data path, as it was. So let me just do this. So to save on time, what I did was I had a branch where I did the wrong thing, which is the master branch. And then there's the branch where I now fixed that issue. So I'll just check out that branch briefly. Check out, yeah, like that. So now in this new branch, you realize now what I have done is, yeah. So I forgot to delete this one, but you'll see I'm not using it anywhere else. But now when you look at my harness.defaults.json, you realize that some things have changed here now. I have, yes, the user still is that is the default user. But now you realize that I have several users. There's the patient, household member, and then there's a CHP contact, which was there before. But now you can see I have my CHA. I also have my DSO all in one harness.defaults file, harness.defaults.json file. And then now when we go to the tasks, which I was testing, now, for example, for the CHA, you now realize what I'm doing is this now. So let me just have them side by side so that it's easier to refer to them. So you can see what I'm now doing is, instead of exploiting harness data path, which is supposed to be used for when you have the harness.defaults.json file in a different path, I am now exploiting user. So the user, so that means by default, we're using the harness.defaults.json. And now, because I am on another user, the default user in this harness.defaults.json was the CHP contact. But now here, because I want to mock another user, I now point it to the new user I want to, and that is this. Notice this always have to match. Nothing changes really. So that's that. And then also I'll show you for the other one, which was the DSO, disease surveillance officer. Even for them, same thing. You realize having their data there, and now that's this one. Now I change it at that level. And running these tests would work. Of course, now for the other tests which are wholly CHP based, you don't have to keep on, saying user is supposed to this. So probably I'll just show you one of them. Yeah, I think this one was for a CHP. Yeah. So you can see for a CHP, I don't have to again add the user as I added for CHA and the DSO, because by default, it is using this user. Yeah. So now I'll run the tests again, and this time you'll see they still run, and they still run. So hopefully, let's see. That. Okay. And they all ran as much as the browser was disconnected. Let's see whether they can run cleanly. A cleaner way, cleaner fashion. Yeah, they're all running. Yeah, so as you can see, the tests still pass. So therefore, you realize the whole point of this really is that was a use case of not best practice, and also at the same time, just it was anti-pattern for the same. Yeah, so I I am done here, unless there are any questions.
One of our community members had a very interesting approach in terms of the way they structure how their test scenarios are run. And I wanted to get deep into that so that we can appreciate that kind of setup and hopefully borrow it in some of our deployments. So for typical batch test processing scenarios, we have something like this. Being in the health space, we have workflows which need to be processed over and over again at regular intervals of time. So for this example, we have the pregnancy home visit service. This is a workflow that is borrowed from MOH Kenya. And this is typical for most ANC type of visits that are scheduled for pregnant women. So typically you would structure it like this. And the point here is that not all of us are coders. And usually the way we work is we have different roles within our teams. We have the implementers being the developers, and then we have project managers, designers, and other team members. A better way to structure the way the scenarios are covered. So a better way to structure the way tests are run is to use a more human-oriented approach. So having test scenarios laid out within a spreadsheet such that they can be populated by non-technical team members, and then they can be run at periodic intervals of time. So whenever there is a workflow being developed, maybe the designers can step into the test scenario workbook, and then they can populate the various ANC scenarios, and then within the test cases, you could have a script that picks up this workbook and then reads it into the code, and then runs each and every one of these scenarios one by one. And by doing that, you can make sure that your workflow adheres to the design specification. So yeah, that's it for cron jobs and batch processing. Any questions?
Okay, just a quick question about the condition over here on these multiple ones.
Go ahead.
And they are mapped to the Excel, the file, the next slide, right? How are they mapped? You mentioned.
So the various fields are mapped onto the columns within the Excel workbook. So each of the fields is a row. So each row is a scenario, one complete scenario, and then we have another complete scenario, and so on and so forth.
Okay, got it. So the first row maps with the first the previous one, the first item, right, in the list, and the second row on the second item, and each of them are mapped on the column header.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thanks, Eliza. Does anyone have any question to Eliza on this one?
Yeah, Elijah, I had a question. In your experience, is this just a way of allowing other non-techies to contribute to the testing? Or have you found it to be more efficient than the other one? Because personally, I feel like it takes a lot of work just mapping things and then ensuring also the code side maps to the Excel. And yeah, so what's your experience with that? Is it just a good tool for allowing non-techies, or is it actually more efficient also than just writing the tests? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really nice question, Kembo. In terms of efficiency, in terms of executing the test cases, there isn't too much of a difference when you write them like this or loading them directly from the scenarios being specified within the script itself. In fact, using the script would be a bit faster because using this kind of design, it introduces an additional step of having to open up this workbook and process all those rows and then transfer them to the script. So the main reason that you had mentioned is the most powerful advantage that this method offers in terms of incorporating all the other team members who are normally excluded from the development process. Most of us have seen non-techies who, when they see a black screen, they just say, that is not for me. So that exclusion, that gap, it has consequences when it comes to the quality of the apps that we are delivering. So there are scenarios that even they can contribute, especially being user-facing roles. Development roles are usually some distance apart from the users, but project managers, designers, they have direct access to users. And with that advantage, they can have opportunities to come up with scenarios that you may never think of them being a developer. But when they interact with users, they have that much insight that they can bring into the testing, into the test process. And that can make the deployment to be much more resilient.
Makes sense.
Just another question while we wait if anyone has a question. So any challenges do you see, Eliza, or any error that people would make on doing this one?
Oh, yes. Franklin mentioned one of the main challenges that users who already have existing deployments may have, and that is transferring their scenarios into an Excel workbook. It may be quite some work. This is just a trivial example with 2 scenarios, but real world scenarios may be, maybe they might be many, many more. So my advice would be to use this method from the get-go. Make sure that as you build out your test scenarios from day one, you incorporate this kind of design. We'll talk about design in best practices that is coming up. Incorporate this kind of approach to make sure that all teammates are included. And then by doing that, you make sure that all the bases are covered.
Okay, thank you.
I was just wondering if this is still in development or if this is already in the CHT test harness tool.
So this isn't a CHT harness specific feature. It is more of a design approach when it comes to writing out your test scenarios. So you can use this today. There are many libraries out there that have this capability of reading in Excel workbooks. And then once you have these rows with the different scenarios, you can pass that along to your test cases, and then each one of them is executed. And by doing that, you can make your test approach more resilient.
Thanks, Eliza. Do we already also have a documentation or anything on this one, or is that something with, or any forum post?
So I was planning to come up with a demo for this webinar, but time became too short. I can make a forum post together with a working demo for this to just help out the community with some starter code that they can use to adopt this kind of approach.
Great.
Yes, so as we build out tests for our CHT applications, there are a couple of best practices that are recommended to make sure that the tests that you write help you to achieve your quality goals. So one of the best practices is to design test automation. For this, you make sure that you have a cohesive testing approach where you make decisions on the frameworks that you'll use and write out all the scenarios that you may want to cover, starting from the design spec. So as time goes on, edge case scenarios, they use the app in ways that you never imagined. So another one is within your test to make sure that the bug doesn't resurface. You don't have regressions that may affect your users in future. And then for early and frequent testing, as soon as you deploy your application, start writing out the test. Make sure that the app as is, from the first deployment, it already has test cases written, and they are deployed together with the app. Next up, we have the data-driven tests that I talked about. And then we have collective ownership of tests. So here you make sure that all the development team members, they are aware of what it means to write tests. Initially, there was a form of working where you'd have one test engineer and then the rest of the team focuses on building out features. But having just one dedicated team member writing tests doesn't really work well in the long term. The best approach is to make sure that all the team members are capable of writing tests for their own features and pursuing the goal of having good test coverage. That ties in well into the next point, which is to prioritize detailed and quality test reporting. So for any of the features that are added onto the application, make sure that you have coverage reports produced. There are various automation tools for that. And once the team members are aware of the level of testing that is incorporated into the app and what the eventual goal is, then it makes it easier to build out quality apps. That's it for best practices. Any questions?
Thank you, everyone. And thank you very much for the presenters for presenting today.